Revlon, thank you so much for joining me today. This podcast, Leaving a Rich Legacy with Jessica Rich, it really stemmed from the work that we did together and just my journey over the last 2.5 years going through therapy. What I learned through therapy is there was so many conversations that I just did not have with anyone growing up. My parents, friends, coworkers, associates in high school, middle school, college, getting out of college. There's just so many things that I did not know. And you don't know what you don't know, but there's so many topics that we don't tackle in the Black community. And I wanted this podcast to be an opportunity to talk about those things that we just don't discuss, right? And it's not always that our parents don't want to talk about it with us. They just don't think to, because nobody talked about it with them. So this is like almost a love letter to myself of conversations that I wish I would have had over the last 36 years. And hopefully it will help, the younger generations, as well as others who may be millennials my age or older, tap into some conversations that no one talks about, and hopefully they can learn from it. So when you did the women's improvement call and we talked about the power of healing, I knew that I had to get you on here because there is a disconnect in the Black community when it comes to therapy. It's this negative, connotation about therapists and confidentiality, and we don't need therapy. We can rely on prayer. And because I know you're a woman of faith, you can speak to all different opinions and perspectives because you're Black, you're a woman of faith. You have a family, and you've also, are a therapist, that you've done the work and you've interacted with many people. So I'm so happy to have you here today and just to share a little bit with us. So I first want to just kick it off and just ask you just to share a little bit about yourself.
Okay, sure. Thank you again for having me. It was so great doing the women's empowerment call. And then, I'm very humbled to be able to be back and speak to our Black women and speak to our community and just, give my perspective professionally, my experiences personally and spiritually, and how it all just kind of shapes who I am and how I interact with those that, that I work with. So for myself, I've been a mental health therapist since 2008 in varying roles, either with children or with adults. I've worked with military, non-military population. Also was blessed to be able to do a spiritually based mental health group to help those that were suffering with PTSD. And so my personal and professional background has just really been one of helping to heal, right? Because it's like some things we're assigned to, some things we're designed to do, and some things we're inclined to do. And I think I'm a combination of all three. And that's what I feel my purpose is. God uses me to give that combination as I speak to people. So currently I'm working, with children, and I have some kids, and their ages are wide range. So it allows me to have different perspectives and constantly stay moving and stay acquiring knowledge and my own skill set when it comes to love languages, purpose, and how it all plays out for me.
Awesome. Awesome. So what made you become a therapist?
That, when I saw that question, I was like, wow, because sometimes you think about it, but I've never really sat and like, okay, yes, I went to class, but then I had to dial it back, like really, like what made me want to do this? I just been a helper, like by nature and also by assignment. Some of the things growing up that I did to help our household run. And so that was just who I am. That was who I was assigned to be. And that's who I've been purposed to be, is what I really found out as I deepened my spiritual connection. Like those experiences, along with the professional teaching, just kind of moved me into fields that God had already planned for me to be able to share those experiences, and also share others' experiences as they decide to reveal those in session. And so I would say it was all of those things that made me be a therapist. So when I took my first class, Psych 101, it was really just to fill my schedule. But when I got in the class, I was like, wow, I kind of like this. And so I stuck with this, and here we are today.
Okay. It's always those filler classes that have an impact. Okay. Awesome. So have you yourself ever gone to therapy? Have you been through therapy? If so, what was the first sign for you that you may need to see a therapist, or what did it look like, going through that process?
Definitely have been to therapy, definitely will continue to seek therapy. I say every therapist should have a therapist, and if they don't, then you need to run, because there's no way, as a human being, just in my own individual space, that I don't ever need help with what I'm going through personally. And so then you compound that with being able to take in other people's experiences on a daily basis professionally. I need somebody to talk to, and it's not always going to just, be a general conversation. I need to be able to receive what I provide. And what is that? That's a safe healing space. That's a confidential space. And that's one that's judgment free. And so definitely when I feel, sometimes it's knowing that I have something coming up that I definitely know will increase my level of stress. And so I try to be proactive, and I maybe, say, hey, I need to just kind of get a session just to go through the dialogue of everything that I'm about to experience, right? It's not necessarily that I know that it's going to be a 6-month or a 9-month or whatever the healing journey is, because I don't think we understand that sometimes it can be a 1 or 2 session thing just to, run those future experiences or whatever it is we're experiencing past someone, to make sure, like, am I crazy? Or, does this sound like this just a rational plan? And to get some non-biased feedback. So it's those times. And then it's also sometimes when I find myself in the middle of something, right? Because, operating during chaos, unfortunately, is something that I think a lot of people who help know how to do. And when you're in the middle of the storm, that's when you get to see, like, whoa, I just went through some things. And then being able to come out on the other side of this, I'm going to need someone's hand. And then I know that's what I need to seek when it becomes, when it gets quiet in the middle of something that's been chaotic. It's like, oh, signal. That's when a bat signal goes off for myself. And
Okay.
I'm like, let me get some help.
Okay. Yeah. That's good. That's good. You're aware of those times that you need to go through therapy, because I know, I had an opportunity when I had a break between therapy, and then when I picked back up, I knew something happened that triggered me to say, okay, it's time that you start talking to someone again. Mm-hmm. So that's really good. And I think it shows the vulnerability of therapists, because it sounds like people think that you're just taking all their information and you're loading it off and sharing it with other people. But then also the vulnerability that, hey, I need someone to talk to as well. And hopefully that would help with the relationship when, when we can see that you're also seeking help from someone else, to be a sounding board. There are, if you think about just the older generation, or just it could be someone who's, 36, my age, and they say, what's the point now? I'm already 36. I'm not going to change. For the people who may be struggling and thinking it's too late, is it ever too late to start therapy?
Never too late. Never too late. Just like I said, even in the middle of something chaotic, like, we can still start. It doesn't have to be at the beginning. It doesn't have to be once we've already entered it. And so we know during each phase of our life, we're always going to go through some experiences. Mm-hmm. So until you are dead, then you need help along the way, because there's always something that we're not going to fully understand. It's like tutoring for your emotional life, right? So when you were struggling in math, or when you were struggling in language arts, everybody said, well, did you go to tutoring? Did you go get some help? Right? So why would we not do that for our emotional and mental life? Why would we stop the very thing that was instilled in us, was to seek help for subject matters from subject matter experts, so to speak? So why would I stop? My life didn't stop when I exited those learning institutions. Now I need some mental and emotional tutoring. So I'm going to go to someone who is a subject matter expert, so to speak, when it comes to relationships, or when it comes to individuals, and being able to explore with them on a deeper level. So they never stop. So you would always want to continue seeking tutoring for your life.
So I like that you said subject matter expert. And the reason why, and this is a question that I sent to you, but I wanted to be able to discuss it with you because it appears that this is received negatively. And I'll share my views. You know, I hear a lot of people say, I don't need to go to a therapist. I have my wife or my husband or my boyfriend or girlfriend, and they'll listen to me. Or, you know, it could be a situation where people rely on their family or friends to be the sounding board for what they're going through and have that expectation. And the one thing that I have just through my journey is, and I've been that person, like I'm a really good listener. So people come to me because I listen well, and I don't always give advice, but that I think people forget that for me, like for if it was me, I carry some of that with me, right? Because I love
Mhm.
you and I care about you, and you can't keep, I say, using me as almost a dumping ground. And I heard people get very offended because they're like, if this person loves me, then they should be able to listen to what's going on. But at some point, how do you tell your partner, you know, maybe you should speak to someone, or to that person who feel like it's the responsibility of their family, friends, or their partner to listen versus therapy? Do you have any advice, or can you give us a different perspective? Because I do think we assume that person should take on to that responsibility, and I think that's a lot to ask for.
It definitely is. And I actually wrote some notes, so I wanted to make sure that I touched that. So sharing with your partner is fine because, right, we should be a sounding board, but we should not be the only sounding board for our partners. And so that's a healthy relationship where there is the communication, where there is the trust, and there is the comfort that I can come to you and give you matters of the heart, matters of the head, matters of finance, etc. However, we also want to um, know that it's also good to have, I said, a non-related, unbiased exchange. And that's because the people that we love, we tend to give them too much, or sometimes we don't give them everything, right? Because it's like, oh, I don't want to tell them this piece of the matter or that piece of the matter. So we leave out vital information because we may still be thinking they may view me differently if they knew I thought this, or if they knew that I reacted in this way, or if they knew that this was a choice that I was contemplating. And so you don't want to be in a position where you're putting a stopper, so to speak, on yourself fully expressing, but you also don't want to overload the other person as well, because they do love us. They are going to allow us into that space, even when they're damaged themselves, or even when they're in need of healing, or even when they're not in a position where it's a true, authentic exchange with them. It's just because of your relationship with them, or because who you are, or your role in their lives. And so we want to be careful that we're not burdening the person that we are in relationship with, be it intimate partner or familial, with all of the things that we have going on, because we want to still give them that space to be able to take us in when we need them. So it's vital, I would say, in my opinion, to always have a different outlet that can give us that unbiased opinion. Because when we love someone and we know their triggers, then we may not fully give them what they need to hear, because we're like, well, they're sensitive in this area, so I need to say this, but I don't want to start anything, or I don't want them to feel as if I'm pulling from information they gave me before and pointing back to it. For example, if we were to say, well, remember you were in the situation before and this, and they're like, well, why are you bringing up the past? It's not that I'm bringing up the past. I'm trying to get you to see patterns. There's a
Yes.
difference between me trying to throw your past in your face and point out a pattern that maybe, in pointing out that pattern, then that could get you to see a different perspective. And from there, then you reestablish a new type of dealing in whatever that area is. And so I think it's really it's something that we have to have a good balance with, saying, okay, my partner or my family friend or my family, they are a sounding board for me, and that is healthy, but they cannot be the only sounding boards that I have. I need someone who's not connected to me to give me that unbiased exchange.
I think that is so. Thank you. I love that response because I think the individual who is expressing themselves, if you say you don't want to be a burden to your partner, you know, I think the response would be, well, they should. That's what they're supposed to do. But you also said they even hold back the information, right? So you're not even fully expressing yourself because you're holding back pieces of the story, thinking that they'll judge you. Therefore, you can't even get possibly a true response if you're looking for
Mm-hmm.
advice. So I think that's a very good way to look at it because I have many conversations, and some of it is the perception of the Black community and, us perceiving therapy as negatively, but I just truly feel like we should look at it from a different lens, that you don't want to give that person more than what they can carry or their capacity. But to your point as well, is that individual broken or going through a healing process, and now they have to carry, the burden of whatever you have
Mm-hmm.
shared with them. So that's good. What about, in that situation, if, my partner came to me and I'm like, I think maybe you should see a therapist. Would you recommend a couple coming to a therapist to discuss one's issue, or should that be something done separately? And the reason why I ask is because I've heard some singles, and just in a conversation that I had, say, well, I would go to therapy with my partner, and, I'll just tell them, hey, we'll work through this together. Do you think that individual will get the best results by going to therapy to address just one's issue as a couple?
I would say the individual that's carrying the burden, or that's carrying the weight of whatever the matter is, they will need to go by themselves first. And when they're in a space where they have connected with that therapist, and they feel comfortable inviting the spouse in, then they can have a conversation that has more clarity, because now you can tell me how I can support you in a more clearer sense, because you've identified exactly what the issue was. You've
Okay.
had time to explore that individually. You've had time, not in my presence, to be able to say, because it might be that in exploring with the therapist, you find that it's related to something that we have going on. And if I'm there at that first session, I may or may not limit your ability to either explain or expound on that because of my presence.
Mm,
So I would say, as an individual, you would want to go first, and you would want to see exactly, what is it? Let's put my finger on it, because we may be able to say, well, you need to go for this, but then when you get there, there's some underlying issue that's not even related to what you thought you needed to go and process. And in doing that by yourself, it allows you a space to do that in, and then you get to see and decide when you would invite your partner in, and what it looks like.
okay. That's good. And I think, to your point, there's so much that we process through therapy that we don't even realize and uncover the root cause. So the individuality, going by yourself, is important first, and then inviting your partner in. The confidence piece, the confidentiality piece with therapists appears to be a concern, just as me speaking, but how do you address that when you have, your clients where they have a concern with confidentiality and trusting just the therapy process?
So, on the grand scheme of things, I don't know about everybody else, but I ain't trying to lose my license because I'm telling your business. You are not that important enough for me to stop the way that I feed my family or doing my passion. So what you have to tell me is not, no, we don't need to repeat that. And that's just on my own personal, like, oh, no, 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 because I got some things that I need to do with myself and with the kids, and I can't tell your business. Um, but on an emotional point, I mean, it's the fact that you're giving like little pieces of you away, right? When we talk, it's not just, oh, this is it, but you feel like you're giving a piece of yourself, and you're like, oh my God, I've guarded this piece how do I ensure that this person is going to regard it the same way that I do? And that's why I say you should always ask questions when you go to therapy, not necessarily like where you keep your records, like things like that, but just the conversation that you can have, see how get engaged you can be and see what your connection is. And that'll let you know, like, hey, I feel comfortable sharing. And it's not necessarily, oh, I don't feel like they're gonna keep my secrets, but as a person, I feel connected enough to this individual that I'm going to give those pieces to them. And there's no way to solidify that and say, well, I can say, well, read the agreement that you signed when you came into therapy. It speaks to confidentiality. And that's all good and dandy because I'm pointing to the paper. But then when you're talking about someone's pieces, right, of their, so to speak, their heart and of their mind, that paper means absolutely nothing. I need to know human to human that I can trust you. So the only way to do that is to establish a relationship with me. So basically, professionally, when you come in, it's up to you if you want to jump right in or if you want to kind of give me something on the surface or mid level and see how that engagement goes. Because I say therapy is like a pair of shoes. If a pair of shoes don't fit, you don't just walk around barefoot. You go find another pair of shoes. So if you don't feel that the connection with that therapist is one that is safe for you, because it may be for others, just like that pair of shoes may fit someone else's feet and they have a wonderful experience walking in them. Therapy is the same way. If that's not the person for you that you are supposed to be connected to for that piece of your heart, you'll know and you'll move on and you find someone else and you don't stop. You don't give up on yourself the same way you don't stop wearing shoes. You just find another pair and then you see how they work out because you got to break shoes in too, right? You still have to break shoes and it could be sneakers and they're a little tight or a little stiff. So you still have to break it in. So give that person the opportunity to show through the conversation, through each session that, hey, I'm connected with you. I'm someone you can trust. And then the confidentiality piece kind of takes care of itself.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I like the shoe analogy. And you're right. Don't give up on yourself. We don't always have a good connection, even with your doctor, a primary, your
Mm-hmm.
PCP, a new PCP. Maybe you don't like the interaction, and then you look for someone else. So I think that's important that we realize we deserve what's on the other side of healing. We are
We
worthy
do.
of those results. And I think sometimes there's even a fear because therapy is really, you have to be ready to face yourself. And I know a lot of people are not ready to do that. And when you think about, and just love to get your opinion on this, when you think about the Black community, why do you think there's such a disconnect when it comes to therapy?
I would say, in my opinion, that it goes back to our culture of keeping secrets, right? Like what happens in the house stays in the house. And it's spoken and then it's passed down in an unspoken type of way. And then it's spoken again over your own household sometimes when you become an adult as well. And so it's like, okay, what happens in the house stays in the house. And we need to break that. We need to say no, because what happened in this house was unhealthy. And what happened in this house has impacted what happens in my house. And because of that, I know that I need to speak. I know that I need a safe place where I can say, these things happen to me and it's not okay. So culturally, it's in the Black and brown communities where it's just like, we're just gonna keep it in and we're gonna take care of our own. And that's what we've continued to do when it comes to mental health. It's like, oh, we'll just take care of our own. And on a wide scale, when you look at it, it was necessary in certain parts, and it still is to a certain extent when it comes to, racism and things of that nature. Yeah, what happened in your community stayed there because that is the only thing that you had was each other. And now that we have expanded, so to speak, where we have additional resources that are afforded to the Black and brown communities, including resources that look like us, we need to learn and grow to take advantage of those things, that it's okay to when you call your EAP or when you call your medical benefits and ask for a mental health representative. It's okay to say, I would like a Black woman, or I would like a Black man, I would like a Latina, I would like a Latino, whatever that looks like, for you to be comfortable not keeping what happened in the house in the house.
And I guess that's a part of what you're saying about keep trying the shoes until they fit right and you like the way they fit. There are a lot of EAP programs. There, a lot of companies that offer now even life coaching. I know our company added life coaching. So there are a lot of companies that have programs that I think people are just not aware of, but then they also fear the person not looking like them. But you're right. Either you can ask for it or they will actually, and I know just my experience, they'll say, well, won't you find, a list of people, and then, we'll let you know if they're a part of the program, because they may not be able to filter it like that, but they still give you the option to do it yourself, and then they'll work with you. So that's not an excuse to not do it. There's ways that you can get what you need if you work with your program.
Exactly.
Think about the Black and Brown communities, and trying to work through the disconnect and the culture of keeping it in the house. There is a lot of generational trauma, and we're not too far removed from slavery. So why do you think it's so important for us to seek therapy?
Healing is like a doorway to just different experiences. And seeking help is saying that I want to walk through that door, because we have traumas that we have seen that are passed down. We have things that are embedded in our DNA that we don't even know about until we have some type of triggering or similar experience, and it becomes this explosive memory because it's a genetic memory that's been passed to us as a Black and Brown person. And so healing says, I need to not carry the full weight of that, and that it inhibits my ability to fully enjoy life or fully engage in life. Not trying to heal is, I can liken it to, say, the trauma of, we've all driven, we've been in an accident, or we've seen a car accident. So imagine that there's this car accident on the highway, right? And so there's generally 4 lanes of traffic. Now, when you're stuck in trauma or in an accident, then it's like, okay, some are so severe that all 4 lanes of traffic are stopped, right? So nothing at that trauma point, nothing goes from there. You have nothing ahead of that because we're stuck at a trauma point. And that's what it's like when you don't seek healing for different things that you've experienced. So healing and seeking therapy is powerful because it moves you to the past the trauma point. So, sometimes there's one lane that's open. So that's like, I'm still functioning. Something's happened to me, but I'm okay. But you're functioning so slow. And those other lanes have to wait for time and someone to let them in to merge in order to move past the trauma point. So if you don't mind being stuck in life at a trauma point, then don't seek therapy. Then don't try to heal. Don't try to understand that the things that have happened before that trauma point, before it erupted to a place where your entire life was at a standstill, whether it became, depression, or whether it was anxiety, anything that inhibited you from being able to fully drive in all 4 lanes, being able to move from the far left to the far right to the middle to whatever you were doing, the freedom to do that. That's what it's like when you seek therapy, when you have a great healing experience. You have just opened the highway to your life. All 4 lanes are at your disposal to move about as you see fit based on the flow of your life.
That was good. Yeah, that was it was good, and it's a good analogy, because sometimes I think we have to break it down so people can understand it if they haven't been through it and they don't understand the process. So I think that's good. And there is a lot of generational trauma that does get passed down, and we're not even aware of it. and we do respond in certain ways, but we're responding based on what we know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right.
Yes.
I know that, so in my therapy, one of the things that I discovered was, my childhood trauma was during my parents divorcing. And, just interacting with people, they perceive trauma to be something that physically happened, and don't always see it as it doesn't necessarily, it could be, any type of physical. So I'll just leave it there. And, when I share that my childhood trauma is, the process of my parents divorcing, and me and my siblings responded differently, but we all had an impact, and we all can even talk about how it affected our relationships. People are like, oh, I never thought of that. So can you share just, from your experience, how when parents divorce, how that could affect their kids, and as adults, how that has an impact when it comes to specific childhood trauma and it's not being addressed?
Yes. So when parents divorce, it's not merely just the children having, two separate households that they'll be raised in. It is the break of everything that they've known relationally, right? So we've been in this nuclear family since even before I could remember on my own. And then now that is no more. And so the place that you had that was designed in that family before the divorce, it's like, well, where do I fit in here? And where do I fit in here? And who am I to you now? Who am I? Because when we're all in the same place, when we were there, I was the third person in the hierarchy. And now that that's divided, then maybe I'm second at mom's and maybe fourth at dad's, depending on whatever the new arrangement is, as far as if there's a new spouse or if there are new children. And so for children that are experiencing divorce, they they have to find this new place for themselves. There's new roles that are to be taken on. And because the parents are divorcing and they're engaged in their own, whether it be a legal battle, their own emotional adjustments, oftentimes the children may suffer from that because who's giving them what they need when it comes to it's not just, oh, we're divorcing, and I'll be here and then dad will live here. Well, what about me? What's my say? Not necessarily that it'll change the legal aspect of the divorce, but emotionally, where was the conversation with the children before the divorce happened? Maybe it needed to happen within the context of therapy so that they felt free to kind of explore exactly what it meant without looking as if they were being disrespectful. Because a lot of the times the questions are often silenced because the kids don't want to add to the burden or appear disrespectful, but they're trying to figure out who they are in this situation. So they're in a sense stuck at that breaking point as well. It's like the fabric of their lives just shredded in two. And it's like, well, how do I begin to mend this? And so you're walking around with these two pieces of fabric, but you're expected to be one whole person. And so as you're growing and no one's addressing that these two pieces of fabric are still in your hands and they're expecting you to become this one person, then you meet other people and then you have friendships and then you get in relationships and you still are two pieces of fabric. And so the person you're in relationship with has this and not this whole. And even though as a whole in healing, you would still, the two pieces would come together, but until you recognize that you were even separated and what the impact of being separated from your nuclear family had on you, you're walking around giving everybody two pieces of one person. And so then you need to heal from that. And then they need to heal from you.
That's that's very accurate. And I'm just thinking about the conversations I've had with friends who also, when their parents divorce, and we're 30 plus and still talking about the impact that it has. And it had, but even thinking about, there's still some lingering impact that hasn't been addressed, that we're having to address going through therapy. So the parents in that situation, right, don't always think of therapy or may have not have been aware of therapy, but I think a lot of things that our parents do, I know is based on their capacity. And that's
Mm-hmm.
conversations that I've had through therapy, having certain expectations and the capacity is not there. And I know T.D. Jakes on one of maybe Oprah's Super Soul Sundays talked about us having this us expecting this 10-gallon capacity from somebody who can only provide us a pint size. And we need to accept that's that individual. So can you just talk about the power of forgiveness, specifically when it comes to our parents and the expectations that we may have of them that are in reality unrealistic?
Yes. Forgiveness itself is just something that people say, oh, I'll forgive and I'll never forget. Or people like, I'm not forgiving them. Like, they don't deserve it. But forgiveness is for yourself and it frees you up. And from a spiritual perspective, the Bible says God is like, if you got a problem with somebody else, don't come to me yet. Go fix that. And he said, if you have an alt with your brother, you're to go before them before you come and lay anything at the altar with me. And so it's like, he's telling you, go fix that. And fixing doesn't mean that, oh, we're back cool and everything is okay. But fixing it means I have released you from the weight of what your action or inaction has done to my life, whether you knew it, whether it was intentional or unintentional. And sometimes when we look at our parents, we have an expectation because y'all parents. That means y'all were supposed to do this and y'all were supposed to do that. And then when those expectations are not met, then it's like, well, you failed me as a parent. And then we go up and then we grow up and we're like, oh, they were not good parents and they weren't this and they weren't that. And we're looking at them from a lens of expectations that were not met on our part. But were they even fair expectations that we had when we looked at the capacity of the person that was our parent? Just because she was our parent doesn't mean she knew how to be a mother. And you had an expectation of a mother as this, but her capacity said, all I have for you right now with what I have going on, whether it was financially, whether it was emotionally, whether it was spiritually, all I can do is this. And I gave you the best that I had. And anything above or beneath that was not even on that person's radar. And so you have to sit back and you have to say, was this intentional or unintentional on my parents' part? And as an adult, it may even invite them into the conversation with a therapist, especially if you think it could be volatile, or if you're at a place where you're saying, I think I can handle this conversation on my own, but just to have that with them, or even the conversation with yourself, just say, you know what, I may never get my parents to see my perspective and what the impact of their lack of parenting or ineffective parenting had on me. However, I'm going to honor the experience of my mother as the one that I had. And I also am going to honor and recognize that that was all she had to give me. That was her capacity, or that was my father's capacity. And does it excuse the experiences that you have? No, we're not saying that it doesn't matter because they didn't know. We're saying because they didn't know, then you get to say, wow, what must that have felt like for them to be in that position and have to parent depressed or have to parent in such a state of poverty? Like, I can't imagine the difficulty that was for them. And you can release them and you can forgive them because that's the capacity that they could parent you with at that time. And that allows room for a different type of relationship with them. It may be adult to adult versus parent to child, but in giving them empathy and understanding and the release of forgiveness, then that space in your heart that you have to say, well, you know what, this is how I can have a relationship with you now. We may not be all buddy and hug and, oh, let me tell you about my day. But now it frees me up to say, wow, I do care that you're still alive and that you're okay. And I'll start to check on you once a week. even if it's text, like, because right now I can't do a call, but I can build up to that. And so that's what you do. You go from where you are and you see where they were and you release them.
Why do you think writing letters to your parents is a way to release them? Because to your point, we do have to remember they weren't always parents, and we don't know the capacity of our grandparents, right? And
Mhm.
what they saw. So it's just kind of trickling down. And now there's so many resources that we have that we get an opportunity to do things differently. But for anyone who may be struggling with releasing or having even that conversation to forgive and give that grace, how can writing a letter help them, even if they never give it to their parent?
It goes back to the releasing of yourself too, and it also lets you see visually, what those things are that hurt you, or what those expectations that were not met. And when you can look at it and you can, break it down and sit in whatever the silence of that unmet expectation is, then it allows you again to think of the other person instead of yourself. And you can say, well, these things, these were my experiences and they are valid. And then when you look at it, you're like, wow, okay, if I give this to my parent now, what is my expectation, right? So if I write this letter and decide to give it to them, why am I giving it to them? What am I, what do I mean? What's my hopes by giving it to them, right? Because again, you don't want to have another unmet expectation by saying, by giving them this letter, I hope they'll see and I hope they'll apologize. But then you're giving them the letter with an expectation that they see your perspective as being valid. And then now that puts us right back into childhood, right? And so it's like, no, because this letter is not about them validating our experience. This letter is about communicating my experience to them. So if the only thing that you are writing for is to communicate the experience and that you have no expectation of any type of apology or, oh, I can't believe I did that to you or anything like that, then it's like, okay, then it's truly from a place of release and it's truly from a place of you healing from those things. However, it also allows you to say, well, I want to get them this letter and she need to know that she was a terrible mom because she out here thinking she did her best. Then that means you have identified a place where you need some more work. And before you can, what the Bible say, before you come and take this straw out of my eye, it's a pillar in yours. So that just let you know, it's like, whoo, before you can even go to your mom with something, you got to come back and do a self inventory on yourself because you're still bleeding from that. So now you want to go take it and bleed all over her and expect her to be this clean person and pristine person when you just bled all over her. And you're like, and now I want you to say that you acknowledge everything that I wrote in this letter, was real and that you did those things to me. So we want to be careful when we write the letter that the letter is just a communicative device and it's not one that is for finger pointing or for blaming, because then that means you need a couple more sessions with somebody.
Yeah. I do think that going through therapy has helped me, not that felt like I was being a victim, but it definitely helped me take ownership of where I was in the work that I needed to do, even though my experience says I think somebody else should have changed it, right? So my parents should have done something, but without me addressing where I was with whatever it was first,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even write the letter without it acknowledging what I needed to do for myself at my age. And a lot of that came with forgiving and realizing that they did what they could based on their capacity. I think even my relationships now with them, I look at things totally different. Just thinking about capacity, completely
Mm-hmm.
different. A lot of it is grace, and it's weird. It's
It
really
is.
weird because for me, I still see the child in them a lot of times. Just thinking about
And
it.
yeah, it helps you look at them from a lens as a human being and not just as my mother, because
Yeah.
that's a human being with their own experiences, right?
Yeah.
And that person is not just our mother and not just our father, but that's the lens that we view them with. My mama did this. No, that woman who had experiences before she birthed you, that woman did that, right? So that man did that. And when we are able to give them um, just the freedom outside of just the singular role that attached them to us, then it allows, like you said, for empathy and forgiveness and understanding to take place. And I am in no way, again, I am in no way invalidating the experiences that we have as minors, right? From the people that were assigned to us. I'm not invalidating the experiences. I am saying that there's power in choice. I get to choose how I see the experience and how I let it impact me, and also how I let it impact me, not only just personally, but also relationally wise to the person who I had the experience from or with.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that about the experience, because even through my women's improvement call, there are topics and there will be topics where I have to talk about my experiences. And my mom is going to be on those calls. So, I even had to have a conversation with her that, just a reminder, these are my experiences and my truths. And I never want her to feel like I'm pointing a finger or I'm blaming
Mm-hmm.
her. But I just want her to remember that the lens and the perspective is from my experience. So
Yes.
although when she looks back, she may look at it differently, we had two different experiences, two different
Mm-hmm.
perspectives. And I want her to remember that so she never feels like I'm pointing a finger based on me sharing my experiences to hopefully help somebody else heal.
Yes, yes. And that's really great because, you know, you don't want her to feel blindsided, like you don't want her to feel attacked. And the fact that you had that conversation with her, that took a lot, because not only was it just, hey, these are some things that may come up, but you honored yourself by saying, I'm still going to speak in that space, right? Because this is my
Right.
choice. This is the safe space that I've created in order for me to share my experiences. However, I want you to feel safe in that space too. And I honor who you are to me enough to have this conversation with you, and and still invite you into the space, right? Because we have a greater level of respect for each other. It's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Whew. Okay. My parents always get me emotional. um, so I sent this question to you, and even just this season now in my life, so I'm still single. 2.5 years later, I'm single, but I'm the happiest I have been in a long time. You know, um, responsibility wise, I've had a lot more responsibilities, but I'm probably like in the best place I have been. I can't even think. I have all these things going on, and I sleep well at night. And I'm getting up at
Yes.
5 a.m. And it's just crazy. But I'm at this place where I just feel at peace. And I am single, and I desire to be married and have kids. I froze my eggs at the beginning of the year. If I happen to have fertility issues later down the road, I wanted to preserve my fertility. But one thing that was discussed was talking about embracing the in between.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that conversation because it it was something that I truly think I think it might have taken me like a couple weeks to really process that. What does that look like for me? Because the reality is I'm single now. I desire to be married and have children. But what happens if that does not happen? Like me in this space of what I desire and where I am now. Can you just kind of talk about, for someone like myself, how do you process that? How do you work through that? That there's an in between of where we are and what we desire.
That's a heavy question. That's a very heavy question. And the conversations are one that we'll have for the rest of our life, right? Because it's always we'll, initially we think the fulfillment comes when the fulfillment of that thing happens. And really all that does is create space for additional fulfillment to come. And so when we have the kids, it's like, oh, I can't wait till they're 18 and out my house, right? And it's like, ooh, when you do get married, you're like, oh, I can't wait till he go to work so we can just have some peace. And so it's like all of these different spaces and stages that we have will truly be conversations that we'll have with ourselves and our girlfriends for the rest of our lives. And so in being in that in-between space of knowing, what we desire and where we truly are, being happy is going to be a day-to-day assignment, because it comes with saying, am I living on purpose, right? You check yourself on whether it's a daily, weekly, but like you said, you're doing so many different things, but you're happy, you're sleeping. So now that lets you know that you're in the place to invite that next stage in, right? It's okay. So our life is kind of like a house. So some days when we get up and we leave the house, some days we're rushing, right? And we just have stuff just everywhere. And then somebody, lo and behold, want to come and use the bathroom. And you like, you want to use my bathroom? Well, let me run in real quick and just, do this and do this and do that. So that's kind of how life is, right? If we're in a space where we have so many things that are unassigned a space or unassigned a level of comfort or security in our life, when someone comes in for that next phase and they say, oh, hey, you want to go out on a date? Or, hey, you want to start working out together and being friends? Or, hey, when that next professional level opens up and you just got stuff all over, guess what? You're not prepared for it. And so you'll have to continue on a daily basis, check and say, okay, if this was me waiting, is this okay? And if that's not, then in the in-between phase of being here with this clutter and not being able to invite someone in, getting to the space of having people just be able to pop up at my house and it's company ready, that's like saying, okay, what I'm doing in the space is making sure that I'm comfortable with whatever invitation I receive. And so to get from having things all over the house to drop by ready, you got to do some stuff. And as you do some stuff, that's that in-between phase. That's going to therapy. That's getting your credit in order. That's, taking the initiative to plan for the future. You said you're freezing your eggs. All of those things that get you ready for the next phase, but because they are not the only thing that you're focused on, because you're living in purpose and you're serving at the same time. So that's the in-between, because you still have fulfillment even as you wait to be fulfilled in those specific areas. So with a servant's heart and leading as a server, being able to give back to people and still wait for your turn, being able to pour into somebody and still be in therapy yourself, being able to plan for a family. You see what I'm saying? So getting to being in that in between and being okay with it is a matter of, is my house drop by ready or is it still scattered? So when you're still scattered around, then yeah, it may take you some time to get drop by ready. So now you say you've been single, it's been 2.5 years, but you drop by ready. So if someone does come, then you're in a healing space. You're in a greater place where you're pouring into others, you're fulfilled, and you plan. So now you're ready for the person, not a person, but the person, because you are closer to who you are supposed to be, who you were designed to be. Because now those two pieces that were just walking around, you've done the work and you've mended them together. And you're saying, okay, hey, I'm here. Here's my value in the in-between, because I saw it for myself first. And so now you're going to be attracting the people who see that value of someone that's whole, someone that has a community sense, who's pouring. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so the in-between comes from whatever you do. Being content in that space is about living in purpose in that space, even as you wait. But you wait with expectancy.
That was good. That was that was good, and it that was good. It is a heavy question because it took me weeks to figure it out, to really think about accepting it. But I think the most important thing that I heard was purpose, like, purpose and not waiting idle. And, we
Exactly.
desire something, but we're idle. We're not doing anything to better ourselves and to really prepare ourselves for what we truly want, right? What is the work that you've done and it doesn't have to just be marriage, but what is the work that you've done to prepare yourself for that opportunity or whatever it is that you desire? So I'm glad, thank you for answering that, because that was a question that hit me. Like, oh, what happens if it doesn't happen? Like, what's next? And I
Yeah.
had to sit in that. Like, would you be happy if it doesn't happen? And that is something that I had to sit in.
And that's scary, right? Because we desire and we deserve those things that we have placed in our heart, that that God has placed in our heart and in our vision. And when things that don't look like that happen, then those are those conversations that we have, and where we give him our heart, and then he may say, well, you know what, I need you to go see somebody in person too. I believe in all of it comes together. And just reading the question, it just made me think on a personal level as well, that there have been different seasons in my life, even one that I'm experiencing now, where that question, that's why I answered it so thoughtfully, because you made me sit, right? You made me sit, and I realized that I've been sitting in that place actually, and I think maybe in the last 30 days to 6 weeks that I actually decided, because it's a choice, right? I get to choose how I do my in between. But I decided, me and God had a conversation, and I was just like, well, since I'm here in the in between, then I guess I'm gonna go live it to the fullest and be fabulous in the in
Yes.
between of this season. And so, when you choose, right? When you choose to be on purpose, even in the in between, it's so freeing. It's so different how you relate to everything and everybody that you touch. There's just a different, that people are like, oh, you got a new bounce in your step. Choice will do
Hmm.
that to you. Freedom will do that to you. And being in a place where I'm okay with me being in this place, even as I don't know the next place. And that's where purpose happens. And that's where everything gets attracted to who you are, because you're doing the purpose in the in between.
I love it. Yeah. That was a question that had me stuck, but I think that question has truly helped me through this season and continue on multiple seasons. But this journey,
Mm-hmm.
me starting off with that as a foundation, has truly helped me to get to this place. Um, Revlon, thank you so much. You answered a lot of questions. I think a lot of questions that will really have an impact on a lot of people who are either nervous or afraid to take that first step to go to therapy, because it is truly something that you have to be ready to put that mirror up, right? And look at yourself and really identify triggers and patterns. And that's not always easy. But was there anything else that you wanted to share or that you would like to say for anyone who may be just struggling with taking that next step of going to therapy? They've thought about it, but just haven't pushed themselves.
I would say just like Nike, just do it, right? Just do it. And it sounds so, it just kept fell off. It sounds so simple, because it is. Just pick up the phone, find out what your benefits are, put yourself as a priority, and don't worry about what the person on the other chair is going to think about you, because they've been in somebody else's chair too, whether it's their therapist chair or their friend's chair. I tell people, I'm a person, I'm a human being, and I have experiences. I feel and I love and I experience pain and hurt and grief and disappointment and all of those things. However, I understand that that is not the sum of me. And sometimes I need somebody else to see that too. And I may need a therapist. And so I need to go sit in a chair, and I need someone else to see that the sum of me is not the season I'm in or the experiences that I've had or am having. And, someone who is in a position where they will tell me the truth in a manner that moves me forward. And that's really what it is. It's if you're ready for forward motion, and if you're ready for that therapeutic relationship with someone who says, hey, I may not be your best girlfriend, but I can still care about where your life is and where you're going to do to get to where you need to be. So I would say just do it, just try it, and continue to try, because if you don't, then you're telling yourself that you're not worth it. It's too many technological advances that are happening now. You can do Zoom. And if you're like, well, I don't want anybody knowing my business because I live in a small town and we got 3 or 4 therapists. Well, you can, with virtual therapy, you can ask for someone that's 200 miles away. So, if you live in a capital, ask for somebody way 100 miles out and broaden your search. But there should be no reason why you're not worth the investment of yourself. We get up, we go to work. Some of us give 40 to 60 hours a week to a company. How dare you not give 1 hour a week to yourself in therapy?
That's a word. It's worth the investment.
It is.
And we are worthy of what's on the other side of healing. Well, I thank you so much for joining me. You have been such a blessing to my life, and I just had to have you, because I think when I think about how this podcast came about, it was through the work that we did together. And, it really has inspired me to be in a season of purpose, and I knowing exactly what my purpose is. So forever grateful for you and appreciate your work and what you're doing. And I just thank you for being a part of the beginning of my podcast to not only help me, but to help inspire and encourage somebody else that's ready to start their healing journey.
Thank you. I'm humbled. Thank you.
Thank you, Revlon.